as you kind of mentioned, the national statistics indicate that church membership is declining.
Yeah.
So why do you think that's happening?
Yeah. Why do I think church membership is declining? I think there's certainly several things at play. I think you could easily say that the church, in some sense, and I'm talking about the larger church, not just my congregation, in some senses failed to adapt. So I think it's difficult in a 24/7 world for churches who are only offering worship services on Sunday mornings. I mean, what do you do with the population who works on Sundays? What do you do with the families who faithfully love God and want to worship, but they're traveling with their family for soccer or other commitments? So I think you could look at decline in that sense. And I think the other sense is just a matter of who you ask. What demographic are you asking? Are you asking millennials who believe the church hasn't lived up to being gracious and kind and standing up against issues of injustice in our world? Are you asking the baby boomers who maybe have a different perspective? So I think it can vary across those lines.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Um, so what's the value of being a member of a church or going to church? What's the value of that in being religious?
The value of that in being religious. I think for me, I mean, it's a very personal question, but I think for me, it's community. It's having the opportunity to be involved with a group of people. It's having the opportunity to come together in community in a space where people are challenging you to be the best person that God has called you to do, where people are supporting you throughout the journey of life. So I think for me, the number one thing is community.
How does going to church make community?
I think that on Sunday morning, you have the corporate worship experience. And so I think you have the opportunity to meet people and have community in a sense there. But I would also argue that you can worship and have community outside of the Sunday morning worship experience, whether that's serving together with your neighbors, whether that's coming together and having a Bible study or small groups at someone's home. I think you certainly have the opportunity for community, not only in that Sunday morning, but definitely throughout the week and just the ordinary parts of our lives.
Is it better to attend church or like be in that community rather than just be spiritual?
It depends how you're going to define being spiritual. I mean, certainly I do this for a living, so I'm absolutely going to argue that being a part of a community and a worship community is important. But I think that God is big enough that God can reveal God's self to anyone at any point in their spiritual journey.
So why do we need the church?
Are you asking that for Christians or just in general? If someone's like, why do we need the church? What do they do anyway?
Um, in general.
Sure. Um, I definitely believe that at times the church as a whole has failed to live into her witness of loving God and loving neighbor as themselves. So I absolutely, can see that. But I think the church at her best, if she's living into how Jesus calls her to live and loving God and loving the neighbor, immensely helps make our world a better place. Men's help people be more gracious. It helps empower people to act out against issues of inequality and justice. It calls people to be selfless. I think for me, I think that's what Jesus says. Jesus calls us to be selfless. And I think when you have an entire human community who's committed to that, it makes our world a better place in every area.
How exactly does the church encourage people to live like that?
Sure. I think the church does that. I mean, you have your corporate worship experience on Sunday morning. So whether that's looking at, the Holy Scriptures and teaching people through that, or small groups where people can get together more intimately and kind of explore what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And I also think you see that in the serving aspect, whether a church is committed to reaching out on campus, doing campus ministry or food insecurity or issues of education or really across the board, depending on the local context of the church.